What's going on, everyone? My name is Jasmine. On today's episode of The Slam Project, we're going to be talking about the 2015 death of 29-year-old Nadine Machiskinic. She fell 10 stories down a laundry chute at a hotel in Regina, Saskatchewan. This case screams suspicion and there is a ton of unanswered questions, but the police swear that there is no foul play involved. And her family has tried tirelessly to get answers and justice for Nadine, and my goal in making this video is to get someone that knows something to come forward. Don't forget to check out my other videos, and if you want to see more videos on missing and murdered Indigenous people, click that subscribe button and the notification bell. And let's get right into it. Nadine Machiskinic was born on May 7th, 1985. She was raised by her Aunt Laura for most of her life, and she was very close to her. She was also close to Laura's daughter Dolores, who was like a sister to her and was 10 years older. Nadine was a member of the Kawakatus First Nation, and she lived with her family in the city of Regina. Regina is the second largest city in Saskatchewan, Saskatoon being the first. Both cities have large numbers in the MMIP crisis, but almost all cities, towns, and rural areas in Canada have been touched by this never-ending violence, and Regina is no stranger to homicides, unexplained deaths, and disappearances of Indigenous people. Not much has been publicly discussed about Nadine. It is known that she attended residential school for 4 years until she turned 18, and that she went on to have 4 children that she loved very much. Her family says that she was family-oriented and was a strong-willed person who always stuck up for herself. It was said that Nadine would always make sure to attend birthdays, holidays, and any other get-togethers. She liked to spend the night with her sister Chantel. They would watch movies and visit all night. Chantel said that Nadine was a good sister to her. She acknowledged Nadine had her own problems she was dealing with, but stated that Nadine always thought of her children and put them first. However, something clicked in Nadine and she began to lead a life that was fueled by alcohol and drug abuse. Her addictions led her deep into IV drug use and sex work. This would not come without consequences because she eventually was diagnosed with Hep C and HIV. She was receiving medical care for these conditions and was prescribed a series of medications that we will get into later. She was also seeking treatment at a methadone clinic to help her get off the street drugs she was dependent on. Despite all of this, Nadine was still always there for her family, and she remained very close to them. She would often call and remained in touch with them. Her mother, Laura, and Dolores were taking care of her 4 children while she was struggling with her addictions. A series of events would begin to unfold that would cause Nadine's death. There are several unanswered questions and severe neglect in the way law enforcement handled her case. The Regina Police Service have even admitted that the case did not meet professional standards, but stood by their ruling that no foul play was involved. Around 4 p.m. on Saturday, January 9th, 2015, Nadine spoke with her boyfriend on the phone. He was incarcerated at the Regina Correctional Center. It has never been stated what they talked about, but he stated that Nadine seemed out of it at the time. Also around 4 p.m., a woman who did not know Nadine encountered her on the street. The woman said Nadine appeared to be in distress because she was cold and crying. The woman gave her a ride to a house on Elephant Stone Street. The person at this house confirmed her being there and said it appeared she had dried up blood on her face. Nadine also sent someone a text from her phone that day and said she was chilling with her homegirl Charity on Elephant Stone Street. Later on, it would be learned that the person who lived on Elephant Stone Street had said that Nadine had been at McDonald's with Charity and a man named Chocolate Bob. It is not publicly known if the person that lived at the house was the same person she was texting. The next activity for Nadine was recorded at 2:09 a.m. on Sunday, January 10th, 2015. She used her Players Club card at the Casino Regina at this time. Casinos typically have an unfavorable crowd in the early morning hours. The late night patrons are more prone to drug activity and sex work. A hotel is located directly across the street from the casino. It's called Delta Hotels Regina, and it is located at 1919 Saskatchewan Drive. The hotel has 25 stories and has 274 rooms. The area is extremely busy, and the hotel is connected to the Saskatchewan Trade and Convention Center. That weekend in particular, the International Brotherhood of Boilermakers, which is a union of skilled craftsmen who work in the heavy industrial sector, were staying at the Delta Hotel, and they more than likely had event or banquet space as well. The sequence of events that led to Nadine's death began at about 3:15 a.m. on January 10, 2015. Two men entered the hotel lobby and one of them completed the check-in process and obtained a room key. When they made their way to the elevator at 3:17 a.m., a woman believed to be Nadine joined them. The cameras did not catch her face, but she had on jeans, white shoes, and a blue purse. The hotel did have cameras, but the only one that seemed to be working was the one in the lobby, and it did not offer a complete view. The outside camera at the main entrance was not working, as well as the cameras on the elevators, hotel floors, and stairwells. I have never seen a reason as to why the cameras were not operational. It also has never been specified if the elevator required a hotel key to bring you to a certain level. In 2015, a lot of hotels had this feature, but I know personally that some places did not if their elevators were not updated recently. The next sighting of Nadine at the hotel was at about 3:45 a.m. and she was on the 10th floor. A man named William Creedon from Kansas City was in room number 1008. At the time, he was the International Secretary-Treasurer for the International Brotherhood of Boilermakers. They were the group that was staying in the hotel that weekend. Records indicate that he was staying in the room by himself and that he was about 65 years old at the time. Mr. Creedon stated that the fire alarm went off at about 3:45 a.m. and that he had a woman banging on his door to alert him of a fire. He called the front desk to report this because he thought it could be a scam, which is kind of an odd thing to say. He could have called to confirm if there was an actual fire. The fire department was called and they arrived at the hotel at 3:51 a.m. The building was evacuated while they checked the premises. The fire department left the building at 4:02 a.m. and no fire or smoke was detected. It would be later revealed that also around 4 a.m., Nadine would place 4 calls to her Aunt Dolores, but they went unanswered because she was sleeping. Something seemed to have been really important if she called at that hour and that many times. As the hotel guests and workers began going back in, a discovery was made in the laundry room where the hotel linens are processed. It was Nadine and she was lying on the floor unconscious, and she had prescription pill bottles next to her. One report says that she was found on her back and her head was near the chute, but this cannot be confirmed for certain without seeing the actual file. The washers in the laundry room had been broken down a little bit before, and the workers were catching up on the backload. The laundry room door was left open as a result, and they thought she could have just wandered in and passed out. The workers called 911 at 4:14 a.m. and stated that a woman was passed out and possibly overdosing. The workers also mentioned that the fire alarm was pulled on the 10th floor, and they thought that Nadine could have been the one to activate it. This call would later be replayed at a coroner's inquiry, and the hotel manager could be heard saying that if Nadine fell from the laundry chute from the 10th floor, she would not be alive. An ambulance was summoned to the scene. They arrived at 4:21 a.m. and started to attend to Nadine. During this entire time attending to an unconscious Nadine, the police were never notified to attend the scene. The EMS workers also just assumed she was overdosing, and they took her to the Regina General Hospital at 4:46 a.m. Nadine struggled for her life at the hospital and passed away at 6:38 a.m., almost 2 hours after arriving. Her family was notified and an autopsy was scheduled for Tuesday, January 12th. Now, at this point in time, it was just believed that Nadine ingested too many drugs and died. It has never been confirmed if she was treated for anything else. Nadine, who was an indigenous woman, was found laying unconscious on the floor, surrounded by pill bottles, and she had track marks on her arms. Nobody ever questioned if there was something more going on. Dr. Cabagon began the autopsy at Pasqua Hospital on January 12th and almost immediately knew that something other than an overdose happened to Nadine. The doctor notified the police right away. This was at least 60 hours after she had died, approximately 2.5 days. 4 major crime officers showed up at the hospital to observe the autopsy. Dr. Cabagon noted bruising throughout her face and body, fractured ribs and vertebrae, and head trauma. Damage to the brain was also noticed along with internal injuries. Nadine was an IV drug user who was being treated at a methadone clinic. She was also being treated for anxiety and was prescribed sleeping pills. Traces of cocaine were present, and her alcohol level was twice the legal limit at 0.105. Nadine was also on HIV medication, which slowed the virus and reduced transmission to other people. It also had a counter effect on all of the other legal and illegal drugs she used. It could either slow down or speed up how they were broken down in her system. How it affected Nadine is not known. Dr. Cabagon listed her cause of death as undetermined because all of the trauma her body had and the high level of intoxication. He believed she could not go down the laundry chute on her own. The doctor took blood samples and gave them to investigators to send off for testing. Nadine's belongings at the time of the autopsy were her clothing, cell phone, and a piece of stationery paper from the Delta Hotel that had the names of 2 men and 1 phone number. This piece of paper was found in her jacket, and it was noted that the jacket had a tear on the right shoulder. With these items and the fact that she was found at the Delta Hotel, the investigation began. But it was riddled with lack of concern and urgency, which led to many unfortunate mistakes that any police force should be ashamed of. After the autopsy on January 12th, investigators went to the Delta Hotel and spoke with the director of operations, a man named Ian Johnson. At this time, the police learned of the fire alarm the night Nadine was found. They also took a look at the laundry room on the basement level and the laundry chute on the 10th floor. There is a utility door that houses the area where the laundry chute is located. When examined, the hydraulic assembly on the door was noted to be broken. It was held open and then released. It failed to latch and close, leaving the door ajar for anyone to wander in. The laundry chute is about thigh high, and the measurements are about 20 inches by 20 inches. The door that opens the chute pulls out sideways like a cupboard. Nadine was 5 feet 2 inches tall and weighed about 140 pounds. The opening is extremely small, and most people would have trouble fitting inside without any help. Nadine's purse and shoes also were not with her at the hospital. When investigators went to retrieve them at the hotel, they were nowhere to be found. It is suspected that hotel staff had thrown them away. Police investigator Sergeant Guy Criddle also requested the hotel guest list for January 10th. He was told this would not be a problem, but investigators never followed up to actually get the list. We will talk about this later. Investigators also heard about William Creedon's account the night of the fire alarm. He was no longer a guest at the hotel when they went up to room 1008. Feminine hygiene product wrappers and black hair fibers were found in the room. The hair samples were sent off for comparison to Nadine. It should be noted that room 1008 is near the utility room that houses the laundry chute, and that the fire alarm is adjacent to this utility room. On January 13th, statements were requested from the EMS workers who responded to the hotel and took Nadine to the hospital. These handwritten statements were not picked up until January 27th. The EMS workers never mentioned her shoes or purse. Nadine's cell phone was handed over to Major Crimes on January 14th. It is not known if the phone was immediately examined, but no records suggest any action was taken until later. Also on January 14th, Major Crimes met with Nadine's family, and this is when they were told Nadine's friend said she was at McDonald's with Charity and Chocolate Bob. A second autopsy was performed on January 15th by Dr. Sean Latham at Saskatoon City Hospital. He found blunt force trauma to the head and torso, which was consistent with falling down the laundry chute. Dr. Latham believed that Nadine came down the chute feet first and on her back. He also noted an unusual bruise on her hand, but didn't think it came from someone grabbing her. A toxicologist was being consulted, and the results of this second autopsy were pending. After the consultation, Nadine's cause of death was listed as accidental because it is believed she had a high tolerance for the drugs in her system and that she was coherent enough to make it in the laundry chute on her own. The office of the coroner would also release a statement that said determining the manner of death is the responsibility of the coroner, not the pathologist. Please note here that the family would not receive any autopsy reports until later. On January 22nd, the night security guard at the Delta Hotel was tracked down and interviewed. This was almost 2 weeks after Nadine passed away. The security guard's name was Joseph Peltier. He told investigators he went to the 10th floor after the fire alarm was pulled and spoke to a man up there. This was William Creedon because it is believed he was the only guest on the 10th floor that day. He went on to say that William told him that he heard kids running around in the hallway 10 to 15 minutes before the fire alarm went off, and that a woman knocked on his door around the time the fire alarm was activated. On January 23rd, investigators attempted to get camera footage from the casino across from the hotel. Nadine had been there around 2 a.m. on January 10th, just shortly before she died. But by this time, the footage had been taped over. The casino usually keeps tapes for 10 days. It was never specified how investigators knew Nadine was at the casino, but reporting on this suggests that something was found on her cell phone that led investigators there. This was a missed opportunity for valuable information because they had her cell phone since January 14th. An attempt to locate William Creedon from room 1008 was initiated, but investigators were having trouble getting in touch with him, and this could be possibly due to his phone number changing. His information was more than likely obtained from the hotel software system that maintains the reservations and guest information. On February 2nd, 2015, Regina police contacted the Kansas City Police Department. Someone within the department was emailed the next day on February 3rd, and background information on Mr. Creedon was requested, but no reply was ever received. On February 5th, one of the hotel front desk agents was interviewed. The other agent working that night was no longer employed at the hotel because he had moved back to India. On June 2nd, 2015, Nadine's boyfriend, who was still in jail, was finally interviewed. It is said that he was very close to her and knew her routines and who she hung out with. No details were given, so it is unknown if he knew Charity or Chocolate Bob, but it is indicated that these two individuals are still unidentified. Nadine could have met these two individuals while her boyfriend was in jail. It is unknown why it took so long to interview her boyfriend. Around 6 months after Nadine's death, the coroner's office followed up with the police department about the toxicology results. It was then discovered that the blood samples taken from Nadine were never sent off for testing. The police department stated that this was an oversight and explained that because multiple people were handling Nadine's case, they all just assumed that someone else had sent the samples off. The samples were sent off on July 16, 2015, and the results would not come back for months, making it far too long for Nadine's family to wait for answers. On August 11th, investigators were able to establish phone contact with William Creedon's lawyer with the International Boilermakers Association. He advised them that Mr. Creedon was having health problems, but they would relay the interview request to him. Mr. Creedon responded the next day via email on August 12th, and the message was relayed through his lawyer. At this time, Mr. Creedon told investigators that when he opened the door, he saw 2 elementary school-age children standing behind Nadine. This is when he closed the door and called the front desk. If you remember, the hotel security guard that spoke to Mr. Creedon that night on the 10th floor said that he told him that he heard kids running in the hall 10 to 15 minutes before the fire alarm went off. This statement about the kids seems to be consistent 7 months after the night in question. Sometime by the end of 2015 to early 2016, Nadine's toxicology reports came back. She had numerous drugs in her system because she had numerous prescriptions. The chief coroner sought out additional consultation from a toxicologist before issuing his final report. The hotel guest list was requested the same day as Nadine's first autopsy on January 12, 2015, but this list was never received. A formal request was submitted to the hotel on February 3, 2016, and when this list was received, it was only a partial list because at least half of the guests had been deleted. The hotel had changed hands since the time of Nadine's death and was under new ownership. I have seen explanations that say that the list was partially purged or that it was a technical glitch. There was no explanation as to what exactly happened to the guest list. But if this is how investigators concluded that William Creedon was the only guest staying on the 10th floor that night, with the list only being partial, how can investigators say this with confidence? Regina police reached out to Mr. Creedon for a second interview. This time they wanted a face-to-face interview so the session could be videotaped and recorded. Face-to-face interviews are very important because they give both parties a chance to read each other, and there are often more details obtained. Mr. Creedon was very cooperative and did not give investigators any problems. This second interview happened on February 5, 2016 in Kansas City, just over a year after Nadine's death. I went over what he told them earlier when I mentioned that the fire alarm went off at 3:45 a.m. and that a woman believed to be Nadine was pounding on his door to warn him of a fire. He went on to say that he had a few beers before bed, did not have in his hearing aids, and was half asleep when he opened the door when Nadine was at his door. Mr. Creedon recalled seeing the security guard shortly after seeing Nadine, and that there was trash in the hallway and broken glass from the fire extinguisher being grabbed, and that it was lying on the floor. Mr. Creedon then said that the security guard had to reactivate the elevator because it automatically shut off when the fire alarm was activated. He said that they did not see Nadine at any time when they were evacuating. By the time Mr. Creedon was interviewed, the black hair fibers in his room had tested negative for belonging to Nadine. He still insisted he never had anyone else in the room that weekend. Sometime in April 2016, Nadine's Aunt Dolores met with the Regina Police Service and the chief coroner. They were discussed in Nadine's case, and Dolores was given an autopsy report, and the cause of death was listed as undetermined, which were the results of the first examination. On May 9, 2016, the Regina Police Service released a still photo of two men who were last seen with Nadine on the elevator. They had exhausted all leads to identify them and were seeking the public's help. It was stated at the time that these men were not suspects and that they were only witnesses. These photos were removed from the website the following month. In June 2016, Nadine's case was closed. Dolores was frustrated because she believed someone had put Nadine down the laundry chute. Around this time, things would get more bizarre when Dolores was contacted again by the chief coroner. He informed her that she received the wrong autopsy report and that she had to be supplied with a new one. This time, Nadine's cause of death was listed as accidental, which were the results of the second examination. There was no mention of the previous report that said undetermined or any comment as to why the report was revised. Later, the only explanation offered was that the first report was a working document and that it should not have been issued. By this time, Dolores was outraged by the progress and quality of the investigation. She always had a strong presence in the media, and she continued to expose everything that was going on. On June 24th, she revealed to the media the two conflicting autopsy reports and questioned how she was mistakenly given the wrong report the first time. This is just another preventable error on behalf of the Regina Police Service and the coroner's office. On June 29, 2016, Dolores attended a meeting of the Board of Police Commissioners and expressed her frustrations about the handling of the investigation. The board members acknowledged that there were errors. That afternoon, the coroner's office said that the case would be reopened if new evidence came to light. Because Dolores never stopped fighting for Nadine, a coroner's inquest was ordered by the Attorney General later that day to determine Nadine's cause of death by reviewing all of the evidence that was gathered during the investigation. But more details would come to light that raised more questions than answers. The inquest was held between March 27th and March 31st of 2017. I have already detailed some of the findings of this inquiry when recounting the events surrounding Nadine's case, but here are some more of the findings. The laundry chute was never fingerprinted or swabbed for DNA. If someone else was with Nadine at the laundry chute, this was a missed opportunity to gather any biological evidence against them. The laundry chute angles like a slide at the second floor, and this is probably why there was no damage to Nadine's feet. I am assuming that this is under the assumption she came down the chute feet first, like Dr. Latham theorized. The security guard and paramedics do not recall ever seeing Nadine's shoes with her in the laundry room. It is still assumed that these were thrown away along with her purse, but I never read that anyone ever admitted to throwing these away. This is strange because you would think the hotel would have a lost and found. This raises the question if her purse or shoes were even with Nadine in the laundry room. Nadine had a phone number with two names written on Delta Hotel stationery in her jacket pocket. Records show that she called it before entering the hotel. It was never stated when, but investigators tried to call it and the number was disconnected. There was nothing in the file to suggest that the matter was pursued any further. Investigators thought maybe a housekeeper left the feminine hygiene wrapper in Mr. Creedon's hotel room and that the hair fiber belonged to them as well. But if they were there to clean the room, why would they leave their garbage behind? There was nothing in the case file to suggest that the two people who were with Nadine earlier in the day, Charity and Chocolate Bob, were ever identified and interviewed. There were notes in the case file that said the two unidentified men were possibly identified after their photos were released. There were no reports or notes as to how the possible names were obtained. Investigators contacted one of the two men by phone, and then the man was sent the photo from the hotel front desk. He denied being the man at the desk or being in the elevator. It is unknown if the second man was ever contacted. This was never revealed to the public, and these men were never interviewed at the coroner's inquest. It was noted that a lot of the possible witness interviews were conducted by phone rather than in person. The number one reason being that the witnesses lived far away. Several incident reports from hotel staff were unreliable and lacked any significant information. Most interviews were audio recorded and not transcribed, so any new person reviewing the file would not have the information of these interviews readily available for review. Because the hotel guest list was partially deleted due to a technical glitch or other means, it could not be established if small children were registered guests in the hotel. Mr. Creedon said he heard children on the 10th floor before the alarm went off, and that he saw two small children with Nadine when she knocked on the door. Some people have wondered if these children were Nadine's own children, but they were being cared for by her mother, so it could not have been them. It was revealed to the jury that several cameras in the hotel were broken, and this led to poor coverage in the area, which leads to another question. Were the surveillance videos deliberately deleted? Was the hotel guest list also deliberately deleted? Besides the casino, there was nothing to suggest that the police ever checked any other businesses for video that captured Nadine. Pathologist Dr. Sean Latham, who performed Nadine's second autopsy, was sued by a fellow pathologist. His name was Dr. Jeffrey Rackett, and he was Métis. He claimed that while being evaluated by Dr. Latham for a job, he made racist remarks during an autopsy and even referred to a deceased person as just another drunk Indian. Dr. Latham later gave Dr. Rackett a bad review that cost him a job opportunity. Dr. Latham denied these allegations, and the jury at the inquest was instructed not to ask about the racist comments allegedly said by Dr. Latham. It was discovered that ketamine was in Nadine's system when the toxicology came back, and records show that this was given to her at the hospital. Ketamine is a general anesthesia used to make a patient unconscious and to treat pain. It is not known if someone at the hospital suspected Nadine had trauma to her body. On another side note, ketamine is also used as a date rape drug. Forensic toxicologist Christopher Keddy said that Nadine had a cocktail of drugs in her system that would have been fatal to most people. He went on to say that she probably had a tolerance, and that she might have felt euphoric or energized, and that it was possible she may have been able to climb in the laundry chute by herself. It was determined that Nadine could have only gone down the laundry chute one of two ways. Feet first like Dr. Latham presumes, or head first lying on her back, which would indicate that another person or multiple people played a part in throwing her down the chute. It was noted that she had head trauma and brain damage, so did she really go in head first? Would this explain why there was no damage to her feet? After all the evidence was reviewed at the inquiry, the jury ruled Nadine's cause of death as undetermined. This basically means that nobody could determine how she died, which you think would include that foul play cannot be ruled out. But the Regina Police Service still stood behind their ruling that no foul play was involved. With continued objections from Dolores, Regina Police asked the RCMP to review the case file in July 2017. They made it clear that this was not a reinvestigation, but rather a review of how the case was handled. The RCMP eventually concluded their review and issued a report that had 14 recommendations on how the case could have been handled more adequately. The report mentioned that a tip was received on April 7, 2017, just after the coroner's inquiry. Someone went into the police station and said they knew someone who resembled one of the unidentified men in the hotel lobby. This tip was forwarded to Major Crimes, but there was no documentation found to suggest that the tip was followed up on. The Regina police initially refused to release the RCMP report and kept it in-house. But after severe backlash, the RCMP said that they were the rightful owners of the report and that it should be released. After the release of the report, Police Chief Evan Bray continually defended his department's investigation and insisted that there was no foul play involved and that there was no criminal aspect to this case. He added that even if they followed all of the recommendations, the investigation would have the same outcome. The truth is that nobody can figure out how or why Nadine went down the laundry chute because the investigation was botched from the beginning. It seems as if racial stereotypes led people to believe that Nadine was just intoxicated and somehow did not have enough sense to know that the laundry chute was a life-threatening danger. Sometime during all of this, Nadine's family attempted to sue the Delta Hotel for causing Nadine's death. They had a broken utility door that was unattended and it was a hazard. But the hotel released a statement and said that if Nadine did fall, then she was the author of her own misfortune. I could not find an outcome of the court case, so it may have been dismissed. Dolores acknowledged that Nadine was a sex worker and believed that is why she was at the Delta Hotel that night. She also believes that Nadine was trying to warn everybody about something that was going on at the hotel, and that is why she pulled the fire alarm. Which raises the question, were there really 2 children with her that night? Were they separated from their families at the time of the fire evacuation? Or was there something more sinister going on at the hotel that involved small children? If Nadine was trying to get help, could this be why? Who were the 2 unidentified men in the lobby? Records show that police contacted a man and he denied being one of the men. If this is true, why was the picture of the 2 men in the hotel lobby deleted from the Regina Police website only a month after it was published? Nadine was a known sex worker who contracted HIV. Could one of her prior clients have also contracted this and realized they got it from her? This could have made her someone's target. How or why were the hotel guest records purged? There has never been a solid explanation for this. Were Nadine's fingernails scraped for DNA? Was her body checked for bodily fluids? I have never read this in any report or newspaper clipping that was available to me. Did Nadine really jump down the chute on her own? If so, what would make her do such a thing? Did she believe that she was in so much danger that jumping was the safest option? She did try to call Dolores 4 times shortly before she was found. What was going on at the time? Mr. William Creedon was appointed as International Secretary-Treasurer of the Brotherhood of Boilermakers in 2005. But in 2024, a federal grand jury indicted Mr. Creedon along with 6 of his fellow co-workers. They all held high positions in the union. They were all charged under the RICO Act for embezzlement that included salaries, benefits, tuitions, and luxury international travel and vacations, as well as other unauthorized charges. The total amount is listed as $20 million over the course of 15 years. This would have been going on since about 2009, 6 years before Nadine died in the Delta Hotel in Regina. This case is still working its way through the court system, and all are presumed innocent until proven guilty. But this does cast a shadow on Mr. Creedon's credibility. The case of Nadine Machiskinic is officially closed. Investigators do not suspect foul play, but there are so many unresolved questions and a lot of things do not make sense. But someone out there knows more about what happened the last day Nadine was alive. Please come forward with what you know. Contact the Regina Police Service or reach out to the Justice for Nadine Facebook page. This page has not been active for some time, so I am unsure if it is monitored. Any detail may help shed light on what actually happened that day. Nadine Machiskinic is gone, but not forgotten. Thank you so much for watching today's video. If you knew Nadine or were in Regina around the time this happened, please share your memories down below, and I will see you in my next video.